Arif never planned to say anything serious that evening. It was just one of those moments when life feels light and everything around you seems like a harmless joke. The sun had set over the small hill town, leaving a soft orange glow on the horizon. The streets were quiet except for a few people walking by, and the air carried the faint smell of fresh bread from a nearby bakery. He was standing outside the corner cafe with four of his closest friends. They had been talking about marriage, love, and how difficult it had become to find the right person in this age of endless choices. Someone had just shared a story about a cousin's wedding disaster, and everyone burst out laughing. The conversation drifted into jokes about how maybe it would be easier to just shout in the street and see who responded. Without thinking twice, Arif grinned, raised both his arms toward the empty road, and called out, "Is there anyone who wants to marry me?" His voice carried through the quiet evening, echoing faintly between the small buildings on either side. His friends laughed so hard that one nearly spilled his tea. A couple passing by gave him a confused look, and a man sitting at a fruit stall smiled and shook his head. Arif laughed with them, pretending to bow like an actor after a performance. "See, no one even answers," he said in mock disappointment. Everyone chuckled again and went back to sipping their tea. For a few minutes, the moment seemed over, but then a strange feeling crept into his chest, something he couldn't explain. It was as if the air around him had shifted. A cool breeze rolled down the street, sharper than the evening wind should have been. It brushed past him like a whisper, carrying a scent he didn't recognize, sweet, yet faintly metallic. He shivered and rubbed his arms but didn't say anything. His friends were too busy arguing over who was paying for the next round of tea. He tried to ignore it, but something about that breeze made him glance toward the far end of the street. Nothing unusual, just the dim glow of the street lamps and the quiet shadows of the night. Still, his chest felt heavy, as though a pair of unseen eyes were watching him from somewhere he couldn't pinpoint. "Arif, you look like you saw a ghost," one of his friends teased, snapping him out of his thoughts. "What?" "No, just thinking," Arif replied quickly, forcing a smile. He didn't want to admit that he felt uneasy. It was ridiculous. He had just shouted a silly question into the air. Of course, no one was going to appear and say yes. That only happened in movies. The group stayed at the cafe a little longer, talking about their plans for the weekend, but Arif found himself distracted. Every time the wind blew, he thought of that sudden coolness from before. Every time he glanced at the street, he half expected to see someone standing there, staring back at him. When it was finally time to leave, they all said their goodbyes and went their separate ways. Arif's path took him through a quieter part of town, where the shops were already closed and the streetlights hummed softly above. He shoved his hands into his jacket pockets, walking at an easy pace. Halfway home, he slowed down. There was that feeling again, like someone was behind him. He glanced over his shoulder, but the street was empty. The air seemed colder now, almost like the weather had changed in a matter of minutes. He tried to brush it off as his imagination playing tricks. Maybe he'd been watching too many mystery shows lately. Still, the sensation stayed with him until he reached his building. By the time he climbed the narrow staircase to his apartment, he was relieved to be indoors. He locked the door, made himself a cup of tea, and sat by the window. From there, he could see part of the street he had just walked down. It was quiet and still. No cars, no people, no movement at all. But then, just as he was about to look away, something caught his attention. At the very end of the street, far enough that he couldn't make out details, a figure stood under a flickering street lamp. It wasn't moving, just standing there, facing in his direction. He squinted, trying to see better, but the light kept blinking on and off, hiding the figure in moments of shadow. Arif blinked, and when the light came on again, the figure was gone. A chill went down his spine. He told himself it was probably Nothing. A person passing by, someone who had already turned the corner. But deep down, he wasn't sure. Something about the way that figure had stood there so still made his stomach knot. He closed the curtains, took a long sip of tea, and turned on the television, hoping to push the thought out of his mind. But that night, as he lay in bed, the echo of his own voice replayed in his head. "Is there anyone who wants to marry me?" He had said it as a joke, a silly, careless joke, but somewhere, a part of him wondered, what if someone had actually heard him? Not just a random passerby, but someone else. And if they had heard, what would they do next? That was the thought that followed him into sleep, wrapping around his dreams like a whisper he couldn't escape. The next day started like any other for Arif. He woke up, made tea, and sat by the window while the morning sun lit up the quiet street below. The strange feeling from the night before lingered in his mind, but he told himself it was just his imagination. People see shadows, mishear sounds, and let their thoughts run wild all the time. By afternoon, he had almost forgotten about it. He went to the small shop where he worked, helping customers, arranging shelves, and chatting with neighbors who stopped by. Life in the town was usually calm and predictable, nothing like the mysteries he sometimes daydreamed about. When evening came, the streets began to cool, and the lamps flickered on one by one. Arif decided to walk home instead of taking the bus. The fresh air felt good after a day indoors. He took the same route he had walked the night before, passing the little bakery, the corner bookshop, and the narrow lane that led toward his building. He was halfway there when he noticed something unusual. Ahead, under one of the tall street lamps, a figure stood still, as if waiting. It was a woman, tall, slim, with long dark hair that glistened faintly in the lamplight. She was dressed in clothing that didn't quite match the town's style, long, flowing, almost old-fashioned, but elegant. Arif slowed his steps, unsure whether to pass by or turn down another street. Before he could decide, she looked up. Her eyes caught the light in a way he had never seen before, bright, reflective, almost like polished glass. They seemed to look through him, not just at him, yet strangely he didn't feel threatened. Instead, there was something calm, almost soothing in her gaze. "You are Arif?" she said, her voice soft but clear, as if she already knew the answer. He froze for a second. Yes?" he replied, wondering how she knew his name. "I heard your call," she continued, tilting her head slightly, studying him with a curious expression. "My call?" Arif frowned. "Yes. You asked if there was anyone who wanted to marry you." There was no trace of humor in her voice. No teasing smile, just a steady, matter-of-fact tone. Arif blinked. "Wait, you were there last night?" "I have been near for a while," she said simply. "But last night your words were an invitation. I could not ignore it." Her words didn't sound like the playful answer of someone overhearing. A joke. They felt heavier, as if she truly believed what she was saying. That was just... Arif started, then hesitated. How could he explain that it was only a joke? And more importantly, why was he feeling this strange mix of nervousness and curiosity? Before he could say more, a cool breeze swept between them, carrying that same faint, metallic sweetness he had noticed the night before. The woman's hair swayed gently, and for a moment, the world around them felt quieter, as though the street had gone still to listen. "I should introduce myself," she said, stepping forward. "My name is Soraya." Arif nodded slowly. "Okay, Soraya. And you're saying you came because I shouted something into the street?" Her lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close. Not exactly because of the words, because of the intent. Words alone mean little, but the truth in a person's heart, that is what reaches us. Us? The words stood out in his mind. He wanted to ask what she meant, but the question stuck in his throat. Something told him that if he asked, he might hear an answer he wasn't ready for. They stood in silence for a few moments. The light from the street lamp above them flickered slightly, casting short shadows across the pavement. Then, as quickly as she had appeared, Soraya took a step back. "We will speak again," she said softly, almost like a promise. "Wait," Arif called out, but she had already turned away. Her steps were slow and graceful, yet somehow, before he could blink twice, she was gone. It was as if she had dissolved into the mist that clung to the far end of the street. Arif stood there staring after her, trying to make sense of what had just happened. His mind raced with questions. Who was she? How did she know his name? What did she mean by us? And why did he feel like her presence was both unsettling and comforting? By the time he reached home, the questions hadn't faded. He locked his door and sat on the couch, staring at the wall. Part of him wanted to believe it was just some strange coincidence. Maybe she had heard his name somewhere. Maybe she was just a mysterious but ordinary woman. But another part of him couldn't ignore the feeling that something far more unusual had just entered his life. That night, as he tried to sleep, he kept seeing her eyes, reflective, steady, and filled with something he couldn't define. And though he didn't understand why, he knew this was not the last time he would see her. The next few days passed, but Arif couldn't shake Soraya's image from his mind. Her eyes, her voice, and the way she seemed to appear and disappear so easily, it all played over in his head like a scene from a dream. He didn't tell anyone about meeting her. How could he? His friends would laugh, or worse, think he was imagining things. On the third day after their encounter, strange things began happening. They were small at first, barely noticeable. While walking to work in the early morning, he thought he heard footsteps behind him. They were steady, matching his pace, but when he turned, the street was empty. Another time, while unlocking the shop's door, he felt a light tap on his shoulder. He spun around quickly, but no one was there. At night, the oddness continued. His phone would light up with calls from an unknown number. Each time, the caller ID showed no digits, just a single symbol, a crescent shape that didn't look like any character from his language. If he tried to answer, the line went silent except for a faint hum, almost like wind rushing through a tunnel. Arif told himself it was just a technical glitch, but deep down, he didn't believe that. One evening, as he was locking up the shop, the power in the whole street flickered. The lamps dimmed, the shop signs went dark, and for a few moments the entire street was bathed in a strange blue light. It didn't look like normal electricity, more like the glow of moonlight caught in glass. And then, through the fading light, he saw her again. Soraya was standing on the other side of the road, watching him. This time, she didn't wait for him to approach. She crossed the empty street in slow, steady steps, her long coat flowing slightly as if moved by a wind that wasn't there. "You've been feeling it, haven't you?" she said without greeting. "Feeling what?" Arif asked, though he already had a guess. "The change," she replied, her voice low but clear. "Once the call is made, the link begins. You have noticed the signs." Arif hesitated. "If you mean the strange things happening?" "Yes, but I don't understand any of it. What do you mean by link?" She looked at him for a long moment before answering. "You called, even if you thought it was a joke. My kind hears such calls, not with our ears, but with something deeper. It is a bond we do not ignore." He took a small step back, trying to process her words. "Your kind?" Her eyes softened, but there was no hesitation in her reply. I am not from here. Not from this town. Not even from your world. Where I come from, we live under twin moons. Our lives depend on a certain energy, a living essence that flows through many worlds, but most strongly in yours. Her tone was calm, but every word sent a ripple of disbelief through Arif's mind. He wanted to laugh, to tell her this was impossible, but something about her eyes, the way they seemed to hold not just light, but depth, kept him from doing so. "And what does this have to do with me?" he asked quietly. "When you called, you opened a path," she explained. "That path connects us now. Your presence calls to me just as mine draws you. The link is not only of words, it is of intent, of possibility. That is why you feel watched. That is why you hear footsteps. I am never far." Arif's skin prickled. "So, you've been following me?" "I have been near," she corrected, her voice still calm. "Not to harm, but to protect. There are others who might answer a call like yours, and not all of them mean well." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The night air around them felt heavier, as though the street itself was listening. Arif finally shook his head. "This is a lot to believe." "I know," Soraya said. "You are not required to believe it now, but you will see more soon. The link will grow, and with it, so will your understanding." Before he could ask what she meant, the street lamps blinked back to life, flooding the road with their usual yellow glow. When his eyes adjusted, Soraya was already stepping away. "Wait!" Arif called out. "Why me?" She paused and looked back. "Because you asked." With that, she turned the corner and disappeared from view. That night, Arif couldn't sleep. Every sound in his apartment seemed louder: the creak of the wooden floor, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint rustle of the curtains in the breeze. At one point, he thought he saw a shadow move across the wall, though nothing was in the room. Around midnight, he checked his phone. Another missed call from the crescent symbol. He didn't try to call back. Instead, he sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the window, wondering if somewhere out there, under the same night sky, Soraya was watching him again. And though he didn't know why, the thought didn't only fill him with fear, it also made him feel strangely less alone. The days that followed were unlike anything Arif had ever experienced. He found himself thinking about Soraya constantly, not just because of her strange words, but because of the way she made him feel. It wasn't love, at least not yet. It was something deeper and harder to explain, like a magnet quietly pulling at him from somewhere far away. He tried to distract himself with work, friends, and small daily routines, but little things kept pulling him back to the mystery. A flash of movement in his peripheral vision, a sudden drop in temperature when no window was open, the faint scent of that metallic sweetness whenever he felt uneasy. It was as if the world had developed a thin layer of strangeness, visible only to him. One evening, unable to hold back his questions any longer, he decided to take a walk toward the street where he had first met Soraya. The night was clear and the moon hung low, glowing pale against the dark sky. He didn't expect her to be there, but some part of him hoped she would be. And she was. Soraya stood at the far end of the lane, leaning lightly against the railing by the bridge. She wasn't looking at him at first. Her gaze was fixed on the river below, the water reflecting the moonlight in silver ripples. When she turned her head, her eyes caught the light, making them shimmer like mirrors. "You came," she said, almost as if she had been expecting him. "I have questions," Arif said honestly, walking toward her. "I know," she replied, "and I will answer them, but you must listen with more than your ears." They stood side by side, looking at the slow-moving river. For a moment, she didn't speak. The quiet between them wasn't awkward. It was heavy, like the pause before, an important truth. Your world, Soraya began softly, is one of many. Most are far beyond your reach, but some touch yours in ways you cannot see. My world is one of those. We live under a sky with 2 moons. Our nights are longer than our days, and we draw life from a rare energy that flows between worlds. On yours, this energy is strongest in people, especially those with open hearts. Arif tried to process her words. And that's why you're here. Because of this energy? In part, she said. But not all who seek it are like me. Some take without care, without thought. I came because I sensed more than the energy in you. I sensed a willingness to connect, a call. That makes the bond between us different. He frowned slightly. Bond. You keep saying that. What does it mean exactly? She turned to face him fully. It means that what happens to you matters to me. It means that even if you do not believe in my world yet, it has already touched you. The link is not something you can simply erase. You invited it. Her words sent a small chill down his spine. But I didn't mean it. I was joking. Intent can hide in jokes, she said gently. Sometimes the heart speaks through laughter. They fell silent again, the only sound the soft rush of the river. Arif looked at her closely. There was something undeniably different about her. Not just her words or her eyes, but the way she seemed to belong to the night itself. Soraya, he said slowly, why are you telling me all this? What do you expect me to do? She studied him for a long moment. I expect nothing you are not ready to give. But I must warn you, the bond draws others. Some may come not to greet, but to claim. You will need to decide whether to walk away now or to face what may come. Arif felt his heart beat faster. And if I walk away? Then I will leave, she said, her tone steady. The path will close, and you will return to your life as it was. You may even believe this was all a strange dream. He hesitated, trying to imagine never seeing her again. The thought left him oddly unsettled, as if something important would be missing. And if I don't walk away? He asked quietly. Her eyes softened. Then you will learn more than you thought possible. You will see my world. But once you see it, you cannot unsee it. They stood there in the night air, the weight of the choice hanging between them. Arif didn't answer yet. He didn't know if he was ready. Soraya seemed to sense his hesitation. There is time, she said, stepping back toward the shadows. But not much. Before he could speak, she began to fade into the mist that rolled in from the river. It wasn't a trick of the light. She was truly vanishing, her form dissolving into the thin fog until only her voice remained. Think carefully, Arif, she whispered. Every choice changes more than one world. When she was gone, the street felt emptier than before. Arif stood there for a long time, staring at the spot where she had been, the sound of her words still in his ears. He knew he should go home, forget all of this, and return to his ordinary life. But deep inside, he also knew he had already stepped too far into her world to turn back completely. The next 2 nights were the longest Arif could remember. Sleep would come in short bursts, broken by restless thoughts. He kept replaying Soraya's words in his mind, her warning, her promise, and the choice she had given him. During the day, everything looked normal. The streets were busy, the shops were open, and people went about their lives without a trace of the strange world she had spoken of. But at night, the air felt different, charged with a quiet tension he couldn't ignore. It was as though the ordinary world was only a thin cover over something much bigger, something waiting to show itself. On the 3rd evening, he made up his mind. He couldn't simply walk away. Even if part of him feared what he might discover, his curiosity, and something deeper, pulled him toward her. That night, he returned to the bridge where they had last spoken. The moon was high, silver light spilling across the quiet street. He waited, not knowing if she would come. The minutes passed slowly, each one stretching longer than the last. Just as he began to wonder if she had chosen not to appear, a soft breeze brushed his face. He turned, and there she was. Soraya stepped out of the shadows, her expression calm but knowing. "You've decided," she said, not as a question, but as a fact. "Yes," Arif replied. "I want to see your world. I want to understand all of this, even if it changes everything." She studied him for a moment, as if weighing his resolve. Then she nodded. "Very well. But once you take this step, you cannot turn back. Do you accept that?" "I accept it," he said without hesitation, though his heart beat faster with every word. Soraya extended her hand. Her fingers were cool to the touch, but there was a strange energy in her grip, like a quiet pulse. "Then come," she said. They walked together through the quiet streets, turning down alleys Arif had never noticed before. The air grew cooler, and the lights of the town seemed to fade behind them, replaced by a pale glow that had no clear source. It felt like stepping out of one reality and into another. Finally, they stopped in a narrow courtyard. At its center was a tall archway made of smooth, dark stone. Faint symbols glowed across its surface, shifting like ripples on water. "This is a gate," Soraya explained. "It will take us beyond the boundaries you know." Arif stared at it, both fascinated and uneasy. "It looks alive." "In a way it is," she said. "It responds to those who are bound. Alone, you could not pass through. But with me, the bond will guide you." She stepped forward, and the symbols on the arch grew brighter. A soft hum filled the air, the same sound Arif had heard during those strange phone calls. She turned to him and held out her hand again. "Once you cross, you will see my world. But you must be ready for what waits there." He took a deep breath and nodded. "I'm ready." The moment his fingers touched hers, the archway flared with light. The space within it shimmered like liquid glass, and before he could think twice, Soraya led him through. It was like stepping into a dream. The air on the other side was warmer, filled with a soft, golden glow that seemed to come from the sky itself. He looked up and saw not one moon, but two. One silver, one pale blue, hanging over a vast horizon. The land stretched out in rolling hills, dotted with trees that glowed faintly in the night. "This," Arif whispered, "is real?" Soraya smiled faintly. "It is as real as the ground you stand on. Welcome to my home." They walked across a narrow path lined with tall, slender plants that seemed to hum quietly. The sound was soothing, almost like a melody. Far in the distance, he saw a city of tall, shining towers that seemed to grow naturally from the earth, their surfaces reflecting the twin moons above. As they walked, Soraya spoke. She told him about her people, who lived in harmony, with the energy that flowed through all living things. She explained how the bond allowed her to sense his presence, even from far away, and how it connected their fates in ways he would come to understand. But she also warned him again. "Not all here will welcome you. Some will see you as an intruder. And there are others, those who hunger for the energy without care for the one who carries it. You must be careful." Arif listened, his mind still struggling to take in everything he saw and heard. Yet beneath the wonder and the fear, he felt a quiet certainty. He had made the right choice. They stopped at a small rise overlooking the glowing city. The sight was unlike anything he could have imagined. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, Soraya turned to him. Your life will not be the same now. You will have a place in two worlds, but you must protect both. The bond will guide you, and so will I. Arif nodded. I don't know what's coming, but I'm ready to face it. A faint smile touched her lips. Then we begin. As they stood together under the light of two moons, Arif felt the cool breeze again, the same one that had brushed past him the night he shouted his joking question into the street. Only now, it no longer felt strange or unsettling. It felt like the start of something he was meant to find, and deep in his heart, he knew the real journey had only just begun.